I always believed that betrayal was something that happened to weaker men, those who lacked ambition, who didn't know how to lead, who let themselves be taken for granted. And yet, there I was, staring at the undeniable proof that my wife, the woman who once looked at me like I was the center of her universe, had been giving her attention to someone else behind my back. No dramatic breakdown, no screaming, no throwing furniture around, just cold, quiet calculation. The kind of stillness that comes before a storm so devastating, it leaves nothing standing. It started with a detail so small, most would have overlooked it. A scent, one that didn't belong to me. Not on my pillows, not in my own home. It was subtle, almost imperceptible, but I wasn't just anyone. I paid attention. I built my entire career on noticing what others ignored. And the moment I caught that faint trace of unfamiliar cologne lingering in the air, I knew something was wrong. I didn't confront her. Confrontation is for those who want explanations. I didn't need one. Explanations are for people still clinging to the illusion of trust. Instead, I did what I do best, I observed. And when you give a liar enough space, they expose themselves without you lifting a finger. Her phone, usually an afterthought, suddenly became an extension of her body. She laughed at texts she never used to read in front of me. She started working late, when I knew her job had no such demands. She wore outfits on random Tuesday nights that seemed out of place when I was around. The pieces fell into place so smoothly, it almost insulted my intelligence. So I tested her. Casually mentioned a last-minute business trip. Watched her reaction. The forced concern, the barely concealed excitement in her eyes. And when I left that night, I didn't go far. Just far enough to watch my home from a distance, like a hunter waiting for his prey to make a move. She didn't even hesitate. Less than an hour after I was gone, a sleek black car pulled into my driveway. I saw him step out, a younger man, athletic, the kind of guy who thought his looks could carry him through life. And my wife? She greeted him at the door in a way she hadn't greeted me in years. Not with routine affection, not with polite warmth, but with a spark that once belonged to me. That was the moment, the exact second I detached. No pain, no heartbreak, just a realization. She wasn't mine anymore. But that didn't mean she got to win. A lesser man would have charged in, demanding answers that wouldn't change a thing. But I had no interest in catching them like some cliché soap opera husband. No, I was thinking 10 steps ahead. I wasn't going to fight for her. I was going to replace her. And not just with anyone. With someone better. Someone she could never compete with. Someone who would make her realize, too late, that she had thrown away the best thing she ever had. I already had the perfect candidate in mind. Her boss's daughter. 24, brilliant, stunning, and, most importantly, interested in me. I had seen it before, subtle glances across the table at company dinners, the way she leaned in just a little too close when we spoke, the way she laughed at jokes that weren't that funny. She had been waiting for an opportunity. And now, I was about to give her one. But not yet. First, I had to set the stage. I spent the next few weeks doing what I do best, playing the game. I let my wife believe she was getting away with it, that I was too busy, too blind, too trusting. Meanwhile, I was setting up every domino, every perfect move that would lead to the moment she realized exactly what she had lost. By the time she found out, it would be too late. And the best part? She would have to watch me walk away, hand in hand with the woman who would take everything she ever wanted. Let the game begin. I used to think I had it all. A stable, successful career, a beautiful home, a woman who smiled at me every morning like I was her world. Routine, yes, but the kind of routine that felt like security, not stagnation. Mornings started the same way. The sound of the coffee machine humming in the kitchen, the smell of freshly brewed espresso filling the air. She always woke up after me, coming downstairs in one of my oversized shirts, hair still messy from sleep, eyes half closed but already reaching for her cup. "You always make it just right," she used to say, pressing a quick kiss to my cheek before curling up on the couch, scrolling through her phone. I should have paid more attention to that last part. Our life was predictable, but in a way that felt solid. Weekends were for late breakfasts and grocery runs where she'd tease me for sticking to the list while she snuck in things we didn't need. Fancy cheeses, chocolates, some overpriced organic stuff that would sit untouched in the fridge. "We deserve little luxuries," she'd joke, bumping my shoulder. And I'd smile, because back then, I believed her. Nights were for quiet moments. Dinners at home, sometimes out, always in places we both loved. I still remember how she used to hold my hand across the table, absent-mindedly tracing circles on my palm with her thumb. Like it was second nature. Like I was hers. Our connection wasn't wild, but it was ours. Familiar, intimate, something built over years of knowing each other. It wasn't always fireworks, but it was enough. At least, I thought so. Looking back, there were signs. Subtle, almost invisible at first. The way she started dressing up a little more, even for small errands. The way her phone, once left on the counter without a second thought, suddenly never left her side. How she used to laugh easily at my dumb jokes but started responding with distracted smiles, half-hearted chuckles. Then there were the moments that stuck out, moments I dismissed at the time but now replay in my head like clues in a mystery I should have solved sooner. Like the time she came home late from a work event, her perfume stronger than usual, her makeup just a little too perfect for someone who had supposedly spent the night with colleagues. I remember how she slid into bed, careful not to wake me. But I wasn't asleep. I turned to her, pressed a kiss to her shoulder. She stiffened, just for a second, just long enough for my brain to register something was off. Or the way she started using certain phrases that weren't hers. Small things, new expressions, little mannerisms. I remember joking about it once. "You sound different lately," I said, and she laughed it off. Maybe I've been spending too much time with coworkers. Maybe. Or maybe it was something else. And yet, despite these small shifts, I ignored them. Because why would I suspect anything? We had built a life together. A good life. I had no reason to believe she was anything other than mine. I still remember one night, about a month before I discovered the truth. We were sitting on the couch, some mindless show playing in the background. She was curled up next to me, head resting on my chest, breathing slow and steady. I ran my fingers through her hair, and she sighed, deep, content. In that moment, I felt certain that whatever little doubts had crept into my mind were just that, doubts. Nothing real. I was wrong. Because even as she lay there, pretending to be content in my arms, she was already slipping away. Already giving pieces of herself to someone else. Already letting another man take what I had spent years building. I wonder if she thought she could get away with it forever. If she truly believed I was so blind, so comfortable, that I wouldn't notice the cracks forming in the foundation of what we had. She underestimated me. And that would be her downfall. It started with a message. A simple, insignificant notification that should have meant nothing. But something about it felt off. We were sitting on the couch one evening, her legs casually draped over mine, half watching a show neither of us really cared about. Her phone, usually face up on the coffee table, was now carefully positioned screen side down on the armrest beside her. That alone wasn't suspicious. People do that all the time. But the way she reacted when it vibrated, that caught my attention. She stiffened. Just for a second. Just long enough for me to notice the slight hesitation before she picked it up, angling it away from me as she checked the screen. Her face remained neutral, but I saw the way her fingers moved, fast, deliberate. A quick swipe to clear the notification, followed by a deep, slow breath like she was resetting herself. "Who was that?" I asked casually, not even looking at her. "Just work," she answered too quickly, shoving her phone into the pocket of her hoodie. A small thing. A minor detail. But something about it didn't sit right. I didn't press her. A lesser man might have demanded to see her phone, might have let insecurity take over and turned it into an argument. But I wasn't insecure. And I didn't argue about things I could confirm for myself. Instead, I waited. Observed. In the days that followed, I started noticing more. Small changes in behavior, things she probably thought were too insignificant for me to pick up on. Like how she suddenly became more protective of her phone. It was always within reach now, never left unattended. She started taking it with her when she showered, something she had never done before. And then there was the way she positioned herself when using it, angled just enough to keep the screen out of my line of sight. Then there were the calls. She had always been the type to let her phone ring out if we were together, saying, if it's important, they'll text. But now? Now she was stepping out of the room for calls. At first, I told myself I was imagining it. That maybe she really did have more work obligations. Maybe it was just a coincidence that every time her phone rang, she suddenly needed a breather, outside, or had to grab something from the bedroom. But the excuses felt flimsy. The timing too convenient. The final confirmation that something was wrong came a week later. We were getting ready for bed, her sitting at the vanity taking off her makeup, me lying on my side scrolling through emails. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw her phone light up on the dresser. A name flashed across the screen before she could turn it over. C. No last name. Just an initial. She caught me looking. It's just a coworker, she said quickly, forcing a smile. You know how it is. They always need something last minute. I nodded. Said nothing. But in my head, a switch had flipped. A coworker. Someone close enough to her that his name didn't need a last name. Just an initial. A message she didn't want me to see. She thought she was being careful. She thought she was covering her tracks. She had no idea she had already lost. Because from that moment on, I wasn't just watching. I was planning. Trust is like glass. Once cracked, it never looks the same. I wasn't looking for reassurance anymore. I was looking for confirmation. And it didn't take long to find it. I started small. Subtle. I asked casual questions at random moments. Ones that would seem insignificant if she had nothing to hide. How was your day? Anyone interesting at work today? Who were you texting just now? Simple, everyday things. But it wasn't about the answers. It was about how she answered. The slight pause before speaking. The way her eyes flicked to the side as if calculating the safest response. The forced lightness in her voice when she brushed things off too quickly. She was lying. Not just in words, but in the way she carried herself. And now that I was paying attention, I could see it all. Then came the passwords. She had never been the type to guard her phone. We shared passwords for Netflix, for the Wi-Fi, for everything. If she needed mine, I gave it without hesitation. If I needed hers, she did the same. But now? Now her phone was locked in ways it never had been before. Face ID, fingerprint, a new passcode she conveniently forgot to mention. And her laptop? The one that used to sit open on the kitchen counter while she worked? Now it was always closed, always locked. Another coincidence. Another crack in the glass. I didn't ask about it. Instead, I adapted. She had routines, and I used them against her. I knew she showered at the same time every night. Knew she left her phone on the nightstand when she did. I waited. Watched. And one night, when I heard the water running, I moved. I didn't try to unlock her phone. That would leave a trail. Instead, I checked the notifications. A message from C. No preview, just the name and a vibration that pulsed once, then disappeared. Another from an unknown number. Another from a contact named work meeting at an hour that made no sense. I felt nothing. No anger, no heartbreak. Just the confirmation I had been waiting for. The next day, I tested her. Told her I had a meeting late at the office. Watched her reaction. The way she hesitated just a fraction of a second before responding, like she was adjusting her plans in real time. Oh, okay. I might grab dinner with some coworkers then, she said, too casually. Another lie. I left the house at 7, drove 2 blocks away, parked, waited. At 7:45, she left. Not in her usual comfortable clothes. Not with the absent-minded slowness of someone just meeting coworkers for dinner. She was dressed in a way I hadn't seen in months. The kind of way a woman dresses when she wants to be noticed. Hairstyled, perfume lingering in the air even from where I sat. She didn't know I was watching. She got into her car, drove off. I followed. Not too close. Not too obvious. Just enough to see where she went. A hotel. Not a restaurant. Not a bar. A hotel. She parked. Walked inside. And I sat there, watching the door close behind her, my mind already moving to the next step. She thought she was ahead. She had no idea how far behind she really was. There's a difference between suspecting and knowing. Suspicion lingers in the back of your mind, whispering, nudging, filling in gaps with possibilities. But knowing is a hammer that shatters any illusions you had left. And that night, as I sat in my car outside that hotel, watching my wife disappear through its doors, I knew. No more doubts. No more guesses. Just cold, undeniable reality. I didn't move right away. Didn't storm in like some desperate husband demanding explanations. That's what she would have expected. What he would have expected. But I wasn't here for a confrontation. I was here to see the truth with my own eyes. To witness my own betrayal. I waited. 10 minutes. 15. Then I got out of the car, moving with the kind of controlled stillness that comes when a man is past rage. The hotel lobby was quiet, sleek, the kind of place that caters to people who have something to hide. I walked to the front desk, giving the receptionist a practiced, easy smile. Hey, my wife just ran inside, forgot her room number. Classic her. I chuckled, like it was nothing. The receptionist barely looked up. Last name. I gave hers. Click, click. A few keystrokes. Then, room 814. I nodded. Smiled again. That easy. I took the elevator up, heart steady, mind sharp. No noise in my head. No hesitation. I wasn't walking into heartbreak. I was walking into proof. The hallway was silent. Dim lighting. Thick carpets that absorbed every footstep. I reached the door. Stood there for a second, listening. Laughter. Hers. His. Muffled, but there. A deep voice, low, teasing. Then her voice again, softer, familiar in a way that made my stomach twist. I could have knocked. Could have made a scene. But that wasn't me. Instead, I pulled out my phone. Opened the recording app. Hit start. Then I knocked. Silence. A shuffle. A pause. Then her voice, suddenly controlled. Who is it? I kept my voice even. Room service. More silence. Then whispers, hurried, urgent. Footsteps. A second later, the door cracked open just enough for me to see her face. Messy hair. Smudged makeup. Eyes wide. Mouth opening to say something. But I didn't give her the chance. I pushed the door open. And there he was. Standing near the bed, looking caught off guard. His face froze, caught between arrogance and fear, like a man who knew he had finally run out of luck. I looked at her, then at him. Then I laughed. Not anger. Not heartbreak. Just cold, sharp amusement. Well, I said, stepping inside, shutting the door behind me. You could have at least tried to be original. She started stammering. Something about how it wasn't what it looked like. How she could explain. I ignored her. I walked past her, straight to him. He was younger, fit, the kind of guy who thought he was untouchable. You must be C, I said, tilting my head. Or should I say just an initial? His eyes darted to her. Then back to me. Listen, man, Save it, I cut him off. I'm not here for a story. I'm here to confirm. I pulled out my phone, holding it up. I've got everything I need, I said, watching their faces drain of color. You two enjoy your night. Then I turned and walked out. Because the real revenge hadn't even started yet. I didn't go home that night. There was no point. The house where she stayed, the house I had built for us, the life I had built for us, was nothing more than a tainted memory now. A place marked by her betrayal, a structure made of moments that had already started to fade. Instead, I drove. Not aimlessly, not in anger, but with purpose. I needed clarity. Needed to strip away any lingering emotion so I could do what had to be done. This wouldn't be some impulsive, messy act of revenge. I wouldn't cause a scene or expose her to the world in a fit of rage. That's what she'd expect. That's what most people would do. I am not most people. If she thought she had gotten away with something, she was about to learn just how wrong she was. I wasn't going to destroy her. I was going to replace her. In every way that mattered. And she would have to watch. The idea came to me somewhere between the second and third cup of coffee at a 24-hour diner. The waitress had asked if I was okay, and I had smiled. An easy, controlled smile that didn't quite reach my eyes. Never better, I had said. And it was true. Because the pieces were already falling into place in my mind, shifting like a chessboard where I had already calculated every move. My wife's identity was built on one thing, her social standing. She was never just satisfied with having a good life. She needed to be seen as having the best life. The perfect marriage. The perfect career. The perfect circle of influence. She had cultivated it all carefully, strategically. And now? Now I was going to take it away from her in the most excruciating way possible. Not by exposing her actions. No, that was too simple. That could be forgiven, spun into sympathy. I needed something deeper. Something that would cripple her long after I was gone. Her job was the first weak link. She had worked her way up, but not alone. No, she had built her career by aligning herself with the right people, powerful people. One of them? Her boss's daughter. A woman I had noticed watching me at company events, lingering too long when we spoke, laughing a little too much at my jokes. A woman who wanted me. And now? I was going to give her exactly what she wanted. It started subtly. A message, a polite invitation to lunch. Casual. Innocent. The kind of thing no one would question, until they did. I played it slow, careful. Let the interest build naturally, let her feel like she was the one pursuing me. Women like her, women who had grown up with power, with influence, they liked the chase. And I gave her just enough to make her want more. Meanwhile, at home, my wife started to notice. She thought she had one. Thought she had everything under control. But she wasn't used to being the one on the outside looking in. It started with small things, me being less available, less responsive. Plans I suddenly forgot to include her in. And then came the social events. The ones I used to attend by her side. The ones where she had once walked in with me, head high, basking in the envy of others. Now I was walking in with someone else. And not just anyone. Someone younger, smarter, more powerful. Someone who held her career in the palm of her hand. I didn't need to say a word about what she'd done. She was the one who was suddenly being excluded. The invitation stopped. The meetings became colder. Her boss, once friendly and supportive, now seemed distant, unimpressed. The whispers started, not about her mistakes, but about her irrelevance. The same network she had built so carefully, so manipulatively, was now shifting against her. And I was thriving. Publicly. Visibly. She tried to play it cool at first, pretending nothing was wrong. Pretending she was still in control. But I saw it. The panic behind her eyes when we crossed paths at a gala and I didn't even acknowledge her. The way her voice shook when she finally confronted me, asking, demanding, "What are you doing?" I smiled. Calm. Unshaken. "Moving on," I said simply. And that was the moment she realized. It's always fascinating to watch people when the ground beneath them starts to crumble. First, denial. Then panic. And finally, desperation when they realize there's no escape. My wife hadn't yet grasped the full scale of her downfall. She could feel something slipping, her career and social standing crumbling, but she still believed she could fix it. She hadn't realized the most important thing. I hadn't left her a single way out. I had set the trap carefully, methodically. Every detail had its place. I wasn't just going to strike. I was going to make sure she had nowhere to hide. The perfect moment had to be in front of everyone she feared losing the most. And that moment arrived. Every year, her company hosted a grand charity gala, an event where all the right people gathered. Top executives, investors, influential partners. For her, it was always an opportunity to reinforce her status, to showcase her perfect reputation. She expected me to be there. Expected me to play along, to keep up the illusion of a strong marriage. She was so confident in her ability to manipulate the situation that she never suspected I had been the one to push her into this trap. A week before the event, I casually mentioned that we should go together. Her eyes lit up with hope. Maybe she thought I was giving in, that we could still fix things. She agreed, trying to act as if nothing had happened. But her naivety was her biggest weakness. The night arrived. She looked flawless, as always, when she wanted to impress. But I was calm, composed, because I knew this would be the last time she could pretend to be someone she no longer was. We entered the venue, and I saw her shoulders tense immediately. My new date was already there. Her boss's daughter. I had made sure to arrive just late enough so my wife wouldn't have time to prepare herself. She looked at me, then at her, then back at me. Shock, panic, but not yet everything. I waited patiently for the perfect moment. When she took the stage to give her speech, her usual confident tone, talking about her dedication to the company, about her values, about her flawless reputation. And that's when I struck. I stepped forward, clearing my throat, my voice calm but deliberate. Before we continue, I believe everyone here has the right to know that the woman speaking so passionately about integrity and responsibility actually has a very different understanding of those words. I wouldn't want my presence here to cause any discomfort, so I think it's time for some clarity. And then I pulled out my phone. With one tap, the recording played on the massive screen behind her. Silence. Absolute silence as the voice of my friend, the infamous C, filled the room. His smug laugh, her whispering, her sighs. Clear, undeniable proof. Her lies, exposed in front of everyone who mattered to her. I didn't even look at her. I didn't need to. I heard the collective intake of breath from the audience. Heard a nervous chuckle from somewhere in the crowd. Heard the sharp intake of her boss's breath as he pushed back his chair. She tried to speak. To explain. But what could she say? I let the moment settle. Then, with a slight gesture, I turned back to the crowd. I apologize for the disruption. I won't take up any more of your time. I think my presence here is no longer necessary. Just like hers. And with that, I walked out. No anger. No scene. No regrets. But I knew for her, this was just the beginning. She would never show her face in this circle again. Her career? Over. Her influence? Destroyed. And the best part? She knew I wasn't just leaving. I was leaving her behind. Completely. With no way back. She stood frozen in the middle of the room, pale as a ghost. Her eyes wide, her lips trembling, but unable to form a single word. Her perfect world, the carefully constructed image of a successful, honest, untouchable woman, was crumbling right before her eyes. She turned, as if searching for someone, anyone, to save her from this disaster. But no one did. Her boss was no longer seated at the table where just moments ago he had been smiling at her speech. He had risen, his face flushed with anger and disappointment. He looked at me, gave a curt nod, then turned his gaze to her. Heavy. Cold. Final. I stood back, calm, unshaken. I wasn't interested in her explanations. I already knew how this would end. She lifted her hand slightly, as if trying to reach for something, some last shred of control, but her voice betrayed her. Weak, broken, barely above a whisper. This isn't what it looks like. I raised an eyebrow slightly. Interesting. What part of this, exactly, wasn't how it looked? The voices, her voice, recorded and played for all to hear? Her own words, whispered to another man, while I stood there, silent and watching? But I didn't respond. She was already in free fall, and I was enjoying every second. Someone in the crowd laughed. Softly, nervously, but it was enough. Enough to shatter whatever remained of her composure. Her eyes darted around, scanning the faces of those she once considered friends, colleagues, supporters. But they weren't looking at her the same way anymore. Her hands clenched into fists. She took a step toward me, her voice shaking but still clinging to the illusion of control. Please. Let's talk. Alone. This is a misunderstanding. I looked at her the way a man looks at a stranger. Because that's what she was. A misunderstanding? I repeated with quiet amusement. No. The misunderstanding was thinking I wouldn't find out. She flinched. Another realization settling in. Her boss stepped up beside her, his voice booming in the silent room. You'll come to my office first thing tomorrow, he said, his tone clipped, final. She nodded instinctively, but we both knew it wouldn't be a conversation. It would be a sentence. I leaned in slightly, so only she could hear me. You wanted more than what you had. Now you have nothing. Her eyes filled with tears. She made one last attempt, reaching for my hand, just like she used to when she thought she still had power over me. I made a mistake. But I still care about you. I didn't laugh. I didn't sigh. I didn't even flinch. I simply pulled my hand away, like it was touching something foreign, something cold. I don't know you anymore. Those were the last words I ever said to her. I turned and walked out of the hall, leaving her standing there, surrounded by the ruins of the life she had so carefully built. No support. No excuses. No way out. She hadn't just lost me. She had lost everything. I didn't look back. That was the difference between us. She clung to the past, desperate to salvage something from the wreckage, but I had already moved on. There was nothing left for me to see. No guilt, no regret, just the quiet satisfaction of knowing that she had finally felt what I felt. The fallout came fast, faster than even I expected. The moment the recording played, her world began to collapse. By the time I had left the building, her phone was already buzzing with panicked messages. Friends, no, former friends, distancing themselves. Colleagues choosing silence over association. The whispers that started in that ballroom didn't stay there. The next morning, they had spread through the entire company, and before she even stepped into her boss's office, she was already a walking scandal. She tried to contain it, of course. People like her always think they can fix things. She probably convinced herself that an apology, some fake remorse, maybe a few well-placed tears would smooth it all over. But she didn't understand the rules of the game anymore. She wasn't the one in control. I was. Her boss didn't waste time. The moment she stepped into his office, her fate was sealed. No shouting, no dramatic outburst, just cold, professional precision. Her position required trust, and trust was the one thing she no longer had. By the time she left that meeting, she was unemployed. No letter of recommendation, no second chance. Just a simple, quiet erasure. The thing about losing a job at her level? It wasn't just about the paycheck. It was about status. It was about being someone important, someone others looked up to. And when that was gone, so was everything else. No more invitations to high-profile events. No more power lunches. The same people who once laughed at her jokes now avoided eye contact when they passed her on the street. She called me. Of course, she did. At first, just once. Then twice. Then, by the end of the week, over a dozen times. Voicemails, texts each more desperate than the last. We need to talk. I made a mistake. Please, just answer me. You don't understand what I'm going through. I still care about you. I never responded. I imagined her sitting alone in that apartment, the same one we had once shared, scrolling through old pictures, trying to convince herself that what we had could still be salvaged. That if she just found the right words, I would come back. But the beauty of my plan? There was no coming back. While her life imploded, mine thrived. The same company she had lost? I had secured new partnerships through it, thanks to my growing connection with her boss's daughter, who, as it turned out, was far more interesting than my wife had ever been. Younger, sharper, more loyal. And that apartment she was still clinging to? It was never truly hers. My name was on the lease, and I had already started the process of removing her from it. I let her sit in that uncertainty for weeks, let her wonder when the final blow would come. And then, one evening, she came home to find an official notice taped to the door. Eviction. 30 days. Her last call to me wasn't angry. It wasn't manipulative. It was broken. You don't have to do this, she whispered. But she was wrong. I did. Because this wasn't about revenge anymore. This was about justice. About taking back everything she had tried to steal from me. She lost her job, her reputation, her friends, and now her home. And me? I had already moved into something better. I was standing on the balcony of a new apartment, glass of whiskey in hand, the city lights stretching before me, when the final message came through. I'm sorry. It was too late for that. I deleted the message. And as I looked out at the world ahead of me, I smiled. She had nothing left. And I had everything. I stood there, watching the city spread out before me, the hum of traffic below blending into the quiet satisfaction that settled deep in my chest. Everything had played out exactly as I had planned. Every move, every step, every consequence calculated. Executed. Final. My ex-wife was now nothing more than a ghost, a fading memory of someone who once had everything and threw it away. She was out of a job, out of a home, out of options. The people she once surrounded herself with had abandoned her, her reputation now nothing more than a cautionary tale. And me? I had thrived. Not just in success, but in the knowledge that she had felt everything I had made her feel, the helplessness, the loss, the realization that the world moved on without her. I hadn't needed to raise my voice. I hadn't needed to beg for answers, for explanations, for closure. I had become the storm she never saw coming. And now standing there, whiskey in hand, I knew with absolute certainty I had won. But as I stood there, letting the last traces of my past dissolve, a thought crossed my mind. Not regret, never that, but something close to curiosity. Did she ever truly believe she could get away with it? Did she think I was like all those others who would turn a blind eye, who would stay out of fear of starting over? Had she been so confident in her lies that she believed I would never see the truth? The last message she sent me still sat on my phone, unread. I'm sorry. Sorry for what? For stepping out? For lying? For being caught? Or was she finally sorry for underestimating me? It didn't matter. I had given her all the chances in the world, and she had taken every single one of them and set them on fire. Now, she was alone in the ashes. I took one last sip of whiskey, feeling the warmth settle in my chest before setting the glass down. The night stretched before me, filled with possibilities she would never be a part of. She had chosen to betray me, and I had chosen to make sure she never forgot it. But now that the game was over, now that every piece had fallen exactly where I placed it, there was one question left. If you were in my place, what would you have done?